Hello, everyone, and welcome to A2I Dyslexia live show titled All Things Dyslexia. We want to welcome you to our live show, and you will find today's live show very, very interesting. I know that I am really looking forward to it, and I'm not saying that because I'm presenting it. I'm saying it because there's a lot of knowledge that we need to understand within our community, one, and two, in general, what is dyspraxia, or understanding what dyspraxia is. We often talk a lot about dyslexia, but I think one condition that's not very well mentioned a lot is dyspraxia. And I am so excited to have the wonderful and amazing Professor Amanda Kirby, who will be speaking to us regarding the understanding of dyspraxia. I was just speaking to Dr. Amanda Kirby just before the live show, and was saying the day I was diagnosed with dyspraxia, I wept like a baby. Now, believe it or not, I just didn't know what it was. And I think it's such a privilege to have the amazing, wonderful Professor Amanda Kirby, who will be explaining what this is through some PowerPoint presentation, as well as explaining what dyspraxia is. In the past, we've had Tumi Suturi, who's come on, who lives the condition, and who always, on every conversation I have with Tumi, he will always mention Dr. Amanda Kirby, because I think there's a book he purchased some time ago. I'm not too sure the title of it, The Hidden Handicap, I think it is. And he sings praises from it. And I went and purchased that book because I needed to find out what it's all about. So my name is Elizabeth Tedchi. I'm the founder of A2I Dyslexia, Aspire to Inspire Dyslexia. I have dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and Erling syndrome. Now, I think there's a buzzing word at the moment called neurodiversity, and that's me in a nutshell. I want to welcome the amazing and wonderful Professor Amanda Kirby. Professor Amanda Kirby, welcome to A2I Dyslexia Live Show, All Things Dyslexia. Today, it is understanding dyspraxia. However, the program platform is called All Things Dyslexia. So we feel really privileged to have you with us today.
Thank you.
What an amazing, you are the go-to. Everybody I've spoken to, everyone will say, oh, if you want to understand a little bit about dyspraxia and DCD, you need to contact Dr. Amanda Kirby. And I feel so privileged to speak to you today. Thank you and welcome to our live show. Please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, what you do, and why you're passionate to bring change in terms of dyspraxia and other conditions.
I will. I wonder if we can just put up my PowerPoint slide.
Sure.
That's okay. Yep. So I suppose the first thing is, who am I? And the picture is as I'm an oddball. So in a sense that going back, if I look at my upbringing, never quite fitted at school in a way. I had friends, but I tried hard, worked really hard, but didn't do as well as I should, considering I was really working hard. And I look back now, and I look back on my family, and I come from a really neurodivergent family. What's that? Well, we're all different shapes and sizes. And can you see my slides? Can you see my? Yeah. Okay. So I'm a bit of a three-headed animal. So I'm a medical doctor. Changed career. I was a GP working in a practice where 19 different languages were spoken, and really interesting world. And then my second child was born, and at 3 years of age, he got a diagnosis of dyspraxia, or developmental coordination disorder. Now, he's nearly 35 now. So, and at that time, I knew very little, and very little was known 30 plus years ago. It was really that I was told, oh, he'll grow out of it, whatever it was. And when I went to school and I said my child's dyspraxia, they went, oh, no, you mean dyslexia? And I kept going, no, I mean dyspraxia. He is dyslexic a bit as well. But I had to go and find out. And so over the last 30 years, I ended up setting up a clinic with health and educational professionals, helping thousands of parents and children. And then as he grew up, I was very selfish, and I wanted to know what was going to happen next as he grew up, because nobody knew about adolescents and adults who had dyspraxia. So I started doing research, talking to lots of other parents, talking to lots of adolescents and lots of adults, and starting to understand what it was like to be dyspraxic as an adolescent and then as an adult, and then started writing books about it because it was important to share that. And now I'm a grandparent of neurodivergent grandchildren as well. And And this picture really is the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So in my family, I have children who are neurodiverse and grandchildren who are neurodiverse. But if I look back, my family and broader family are lots of different things. And they have lots of different diagnoses, from dyslexia, but also other things as well. And they're in all sorts of areas of life. And I've got some relatives who are autistic and nonverbal and have learning disabilities, and I've got some people who are scientists and computer analysts, so all ranges of everything. And I think that's really important, is that we're a really neurodivergent family. But everybody's got their own strengths, but society often disables you when you can't get support, and I think that's really important. So I realized I needed to help other people to raise awareness, get information out, gain support, because it's not fair, because other people can't do what they want to do because society's disabling them. So that's part of my journey.
Wonderful. And just before we go on with the slides, I just want to read a little bit about you. And I know you've given an introduction. So Professor Amanda Kirby wears several hats as a medic. You've already said that. Academic, entrepreneur, and parent of an adult with dyspraxia and dyslexia and ADHD, passionate about improving the lives of people who are neurodiverse in education and employment. She's also CEO of fast expanding a computer education and work-based profiling company, which is doitprofiler.com. And we share that with our viewers after the show, which has developed an innovative, that's it, big word, computerized assessment platform for schools, colleges, justice, employability, and apprenticeship sector. Now, about maybe 30 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to have read that. And that's why I was saying going to uni was my life saving. A lot of people say, well, what if I don't go to uni? What's going to happen to me then? Now, it's a very interesting question, but I know that a lot of, particularly being Black and coming from a family that would not have understood dyslexia or dyspraxia, the university saved my life. And I can only sing praises about that. Those that haven't gone the education system way, perhaps this is why we're here, A2I Dyslexia and Professor Amanda Kirby and all the other dyslexia organizations that are out there who can support you, because not everybody will do the education route in terms of university and so forth. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that, Dr. Amanda Kirby, because it's really, really important that people get to find out. If you want to read more about Professor Amanda Kirby, please, she's on LinkedIn. She's on other social media platforms, and you can find out a little bit more about her. But before I start, I just want to go to my first question, Professor Amanda. Sure. What is dyspraxia and DCD? What is it?
Okay, so I'm going to run through that first question with you. And if you start off by thinking about, take one day in your life, when you get up this morning and you go to bed tonight, and you think of everything in between, from getting dressed to cleaning your teeth to doing your hair to feeding yourself at breakfast and packing a bag, whatever you're doing, we need coordination. And coordination is everything from writing to doing everything in your day. We need movement, whether that's your small movements in your hands or big movement when you're balancing on a chair, or if you're a child kicking and throwing a ball, we need to be coordinated. And dyspraxia, or the international name developmental coordination disorder, is the focus of where you have challenges with coordination, then that is a child who has dyspraxia or DCD. So this is really important. And one of the things about it is that, yeah, coordination, you need everything. So if you think about those things that you do that require coordination, if those are challenging, you can see why dyspraxia affects every aspect of your life. So it's been called different things. Yeah. So over the years, we've changed all the names and we've used horrible names like motor morons. Isn't that a terrible name? And in the 1960s, clumsy child syndrome. So we've changed the words because we didn't quite know, and we recognized there were children, because we used to think this was a children's condition and you grew out of it. And it's really only been, let me go backwards. Sorry, I clicked through. But what we know is that it affects about 1 million adults, about 3 to 5% of children. That it is different from something like cerebral palsy or a stroke. So it's not cerebral palsy and it's not a stroke. Sorry, I'm not sure why it's doing that. It affects your everyday functioning and everyday activities, such as I said, at work and at leisure. It means that it takes you longer learning some skills. And I think that's really important, that might take you longer to learn to drive a car or to ride a bike, or to, even with your handwriting, it might be much harder for you to do them. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't, but those things are much harder for you to do. So,
Professor Amanda Kirby, is that why I have never been able to ride a bicycle?
yes.
I have dyspraxia. Yeah.
Yes. So if you think about riding a bike, you're having to multitask. So you're having to balance, you're having to guide the bike, you're having to look where you're going, you're having to pedal at the same time. And where you have to do a number of different things all at once, that gets harder for you to do. So riding a bike particularly is one of those things that lots of children who are dyspraxic find much harder to learn to do.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you won't. It doesn't mean you can't, though. My 35-year-old son last week went on a 9-mile bike ride.
Oh, wow.
He only learned to ride a bike in his 20s.
Wow. And also, when I'm driving, I get lost everywhere. Left is right, right is left. If I'm not careful, I might even go straight and end up in a pond, and I'm struggling to look at the I've called it TomTom. People say it's not TomTom. It's called what's the word of it? Sat nav.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling to read a sat nav and the map and focus on a road.
Yeah, well, don't. That's the first thing. Turn the sat nav off. Turn the sat nav off, because I don't want you looking at the sat nav and not at the road. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the first thing. So some people find, because I'm worried now. Okay.
Yes.
Learning to drive a car. So some people find if they're dyspraxic, they find they go too close to the car in front. So there's a distance perception. Parking the car, bit of a nightmare as well. So, and some people find driving with an automatic is easier than driving with a manual car. And it is that variable. You're having to steer, gear, look around, and you need to reduce your number of distractions. So don't look at that sat nav. Turn it off if you have to. Just have it talking to you, but don't have it there distracting you.
Absolutely.
Try not to, when you're driving, talking to somebody next to you. Focus on the road, So the things you can do that can really help.
Absolutely. Now, totally agree with you. So what I've decided to do now is just have someone with me. I'll just say, look, come with me to this place. Or what I might do is go at the night before to have a look at where I need to go.
Good idea.
Yeah, because it's becoming a bit of a nightmare. My organizational skills are all over the place. And I'm sure it's something to do with my dyspraxia and dyslexia. Time telling, time management, all that.
Yeah. Well, it's when your brain's trying to do a number of different things, and it's a bit like you've only got so much capacity in your bucket. If your brain's your bucket, and if you're trying to focus on the driving, and then you're trying to think about where you're going, and you think about what's going to happen when you get there, it's a bit too much, and your bucket's overflowing. So if somebody sitting next to you is directing you, that means you don't need to think about that bit, so you can focus on the driving bit. Right? So it means,
wonderful. And it's things like this that I normally say, look, dyspraxia and dyslexia and other things, it's not just a classroom issue. It can affect every part of your life. And that's why I think it's great having you this evening on our show to give us a little bit more explanation. I just want to welcome some of our viewers who've come on the platform. So we've got Leslie, who joins us every week. And I think Alex will probably put some questions up. Good evening, ladies. Yes, thank you. Good evening, Leslie. Leslie's also dyslexic, changed careers recently. Powell, I'm not too sure. We've never had this person on, but hello. My son has, I'm not sure, I can't pronounce that word, Professor Amanda Kirby. Maybe you can pronounce it.
So hold on, I need to stop.
My son has something, which I can't pronounce. Hypertonia issues.
Oh, here we go. Right. Hypertonia. So hypertonia means just low toned or floppy. So it means that, and some people find that it's harder to sit up, and it's harder to, so your core, which helps you to sit up. So it's harder to do things. You're having to work much harder. So
yeah. And I don't know if it's a he or she, but there's another question that says, how can I help him with education?
Okay, so perhaps I need to know a little bit about what the areas of challenge are. So if it's writing, you might want to be able to get him on a keyboard so he's not having to write so much. Because if you think about, if you've got children now, they're not going to be writing when they go to school, when they go to work. So practicing keyboard skills can really make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Putting a lot of children with dyspraxia often find organizationally it's harder. So actually having knowing what something good is going to look like. So if you've got an essay planner, so if your child is older and a teenager, giving them an essay planner, or asking school to an essay planner so they can drop their information in, means they've got less to structure. That can make a big difference. Using timers to help, or a diary to help organize them to see when they've got work to do and when they've got to give it in.
Mm-hmm. Naomi says, my daughter is diagnosed with dyspraxia or dyspraxic and just turning 18, only just been given correct level of exam extra time, just in time for A levels. Well, that's good news, isn't it?
That is good news. I mean, sometimes actually, sometimes the problem is it's not about extra time. Sometimes it's about making sure your child knows to move on to the next question. So remembering, if you've got 4 questions in an hour, allocate 15 minutes to each question, because sometimes I've seen some kids spend too long on the first question, they've lost sense of time, and they've run out of time even when they've got extra time. Do you see what I mean?
Of course, yeah. Hello, Jill. Jill, lovely to join us this evening. I'm dyspraxic. I'm dyspraxic. It does take you longer to write and drive a car. Oh, goodness me, Leslie. I couldn't agree with you more.
It really does. It really does. So handwriting is a persistent problem. It's challenging. And even my 35-year-old son, his handwriting looks like a spider crossing the page still, but his IT skills are really good, you know. So he's very good on the computer. It's less of, look, it's brilliant. We've got computers these days. We've got phones. If you thought about it 20 years ago, people would go, I'm never going to be able to afford a computer. People use computers or they use mobile phones. We've got technology there. And actually, a lot of the technology, even inbuilt, allows you just even to speak into it and it types automatically.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So this is a brilliant time because there are ways around some of these challenges now that we wouldn't have had 10 or 15 years ago.
Of course, and I sing praises all the time about the assistive technology, the amazing people that are working on it. Last week we had Jack Churchill, who's got an organization called the Scanning Pen, and how great to have something like that. And I just wish when I was younger, back in the 80s, there was something like that, or should I say the 70s? But there wasn't at the time. So I always say to parents, look, tap into the services that are out there. I was once a child. I'm now an adult. Dyspraxia never left me. I still have this condition.
Yeah,
so
you don't grow out of it.
Exactly. We never really grow out of it. So that's something I wanted to share with parents who are watching as well. Leslie says, I've started to ride a bike through lockdown. Well done, Leslie. That's really great. Wonderful.
That's great. Well, as I said, my 35-year-old son went on a 9-mile bike ride. And, you know, when he was in his teens, he always thought he'd like to ride a bike. And we tried several times. And then when he got to his 20s, he just persisted. And he learned pretty quickly, and it was important to him. It's not important to everybody, but actually to him, it was a rite of passage. It was almost like, I want to prove that I can ride a bike. And now he's cycling. You know, I wouldn't want him on a major busy road, but I would be worried.
I have often said, if only bicycles had 4 wheels, I'd be fine. I can balance that.
Well, some people use tricycles, so there are adult tricycles, you know, so there are ways, if you do feel it's unstable, there are ways around that. And we've had adults using trikes rather than bikes because of greater stability. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor Amanda Kirby. I'm just going to move on to my next question. I mean, people will be joining us, and if we get the time, of course, I'll read out their questions. So what help and support is available for people with dyspraxia within the education system?
So in primary school, children can get help with things like learning with their writing and with fine motor skills. So in schools, teachers are getting to know a little bit more about dyspraxia than they did a few years ago, and they will practice some of the skills. So if your child's got difficulty with fine motor skills, practicing them, getting hand strength will really help. Focusing on those things. So if your child's got some specific difficulties, is to practice that skill regularly, not for long periods of time, even 10 or 15 minutes, 2 or 3 times a week can really help to automate the skills. It's a bit like, I remember I've got 3 kids and teaching them to clean their teeth. My goodness, it took years to get them to automatically clean their teeth. But the same thing goes that where you've got a motor skill, a little bit of practice often can really make a difference. So in primary school, you can do things like, even you at home can practice things like getting dressed, getting undressed. If they need to change for PE or games, they can do it faster. Practicing it when they're not under pressure can really make a difference.
Yeah, and of course, tying shoelaces, zips, buttons. If I'm looking in the mirror to do my buttons up, I get all muddled up. My shoelaces, I'm like, well, maybe I better head to Clark's where I can get Velcro, pair of trainers.
Velcro's brilliant. So Velcro's brilliant. So that's the other thing, is that where you've got a challenge with motor difficulties, is find a way around it. So you can use Velcro on your shoes. You can use elastic shoelaces as well. You can use a keyboard instead of handwriting. You can use scissors that are sprung scissors rather than having to put your fingers in. You can use ones that just open and close, which makes it easier. If you've got a ruler, put a doorknob on a wooden ruler so your child can hold the ruler so it's not slipping and sliding. So there's lots of things you can do to really help. Using cutlery, if your child's got difficulties in primary school eating, even bending a knife and fork, or buying an IKEA, they've got some cutlery there, which is easy to use, or caring cutlery. All of those things can help. So a lot of it is strategies to find your way around to do what your child needs to do. And sometimes giving a little bit of extra time to learn the skills and a bit of extra practice can really make a difference.
Of course. And I think it's really important that we've got this platform today to talk about dyspraxia, understanding of dyspraxia, particularly in the BAME community, for example. Lots of people have heard of dyslexia. We all talk about dyslexia, and I've had people ask me, is it when you can't read, write, and spell? And you think, okay, if that's what you think, fine. But what about dyspraxia? There's not much understanding around that. And I think it's great to have this platform today and to share the knowledge that you have with our viewers. I think there was a question that quickly just came up from someone else. Alex, if you can share that with us, please. If not, we'll move on. I think someone said, I'm here to learn more about dyspraxia. Dr. Amanda Kirby, how can you help? So that will come up in a minute and I'll share that. Yeah. But before that, can someone with dyspraxia get access to work in a workplace?
Yes, they can. It's really important. So access to work is even working at the moment in lockdown. So really important. So if you're being recruited virtually, you can have a help for access to work as well. So you can get access to work for what is deemed a disability or a lifelong condition that's impacting on your everyday functioning. Dyspraxia fits with that. So access to work is really important because it means you can get those adjustments in work that can really make a difference. And that might be software, it might be keyboard, it might be helping. Often people who are dyspraxic find things like organization and time management challenging. So when you're starting in a new job, having somebody to help you set up your desktop and what your tasks are and providing reminders and helping with you with your coaching to get you going, that can really make a difference. So access to work can really help people when they're first starting in the job and when they're in the job itself. So yes.
Wonderful. And I think, Professor Kirby, I think we might go back to the presentation and maybe have a little bit more understanding of what dyspraxia is, if that's okay.
It is. Fine.
Yeah. Thank you so much. In the meantime, I just wanted to say to our viewers, welcome for joining us. Today, we're talking about understanding dyspraxia. We've got Professor Amanda Kirby, who have written many books on what dyspraxia is, and I'm going to let her go through her slides with us. Professor Amanda Kirby, all yours.
Thank you. For some reason, my slides are bouncing, so I apologize. So I think the first thing is that we have dyspraxia is coordination difficulties. So that's the first thing. Some people also have, and that might be small movements. It might be big movements like catching, throwing, kicking a ball. It can be balance. So holding a tray and carrying things up and down the stairs might be harder. Using cutlery if you've got children. So using cutlery, getting dressed. Might be doing your shoelaces up, doing your buttons up. Some children find things like packing a bag is harder to do as well, to fold things up and put it in their bag. And also people with dyspraxia, children and adults, sometimes find things like organizational is difficult, time management. And what we know that the impact of perhaps not being able to play sports or being chosen not to be in the team or being goalie when you're a footballer or a hockey player or in netball, nobody wants you to be in your team, is it can impact on your self-esteem. And so what happens then is that you might feel that you don't want to run in the sports day and other people think of you as more clumsy and it impacts on your self-esteem. So that's really important. We think socially the impact as well. And I think although motor difficulties persist, it's the non-motor bits, the bits around time management, planning and personal organization, and the social and emotional impact. We know that children and adults with dyspraxia often feel more anxious. They can feel more anxious going to new settings, anxious making relationships. It's important we think about those things. And I think what we do know that with the right support and adjustments put in place, and if it's practical strategies for primary school or secondary school, you can do great things like anybody else. And I think that's really important and can be very successful. And so that's really important. We focus on the things that you can do and find ways around the things that are challenging, but ensuring that you have opportunity to engage and make friends and keep fit, I think is really important. I look back at my son when he was younger, and in his teens, he was a bit overweight. He was very tired. He wasn't very fit. Now he's uber fit, and his doing weights and going to the gym when he could, obviously, at the moment it's not so easy, really made a difference, not just to his fitness, but also to reduce fatigue. Because a lot of adults seem to say they feel very tired because they're having to work harder to do everything with their coordination. So I think that's really important. So I'm going to just stop there a moment and just pick up any questions you might have.
Okay, Alex is in our studio. So Alex, do we have any questions come up at the moment? Maybe we can answer a few and go back to, right. I'm here to learn. This is Matt Ozoli, I think. Please do pardon me if I can't pronounce anything. It's not deliberate. It's part of my dyslexia and my dyspraxia and all the other conditions. But if I've said that wrong, please correct me at some other point. If not, we'll just go on with it, shall we? I'm here to learn more about dyspraxia. Can you tell us more about it? I think Professor Amanda Kirby is doing that. And has she finished her presentation? No, she hasn't. Right. Someone said they love the idea of the doorknob on a ruler. I think it's a fantastic idea. I've never even thought of that, to be honest.
And things like, so if you've got children who are dyspraxic, and sometimes cutting with use a knife or fork with younger children is really difficult. So if you've got knife and fork, you can bend them so they're curved, just by a cheap knife and fork, and then you can bend it. That can help that it is curved. So when you're cutting in, and if the plate's moving around, just make sure, put even a damp tea towel under the plate just to stop it moving, because then it makes it easier for a child to cut it. And also make sure your children's feet are on the floor. If they're trying to balance and their feet are off the floor and they're trying to cut, well, they're going to be moving all over the place. So really think about when your children are working, they've got their feet on the floor, whether it's writing or it's using a knife and fork, because they do need to be stable. To take your arms away from your body, you need to have stability. So feet on the floor help. And if they got two little legs, then put a box under their feet. Yeah, we used to have telephone directories in the old days. So, but if necessary, a couple of boxes so they can put their feet down so they feel stable. So that's really important.
And I think it's really important that we're actually talking about this topic, because even up to the age I am now, I'm still very clumsy. I'm still dropping things. I'm still sort of trying to eat, but I've got a bib on. If I must say, I put like something over me, so I'm not getting it all over. And this is not deliberate. It's just coordination. And it's really important that, people that are watching understand why maybe their children might drop certain things, or I walk into a door, sometimes I don't even know the desk is there. And I'm like, oh, what's wrong with me? I know I'm diagnosed with dyslexia.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, though, what you've said, because it's not your fault. And sometimes parents get very frustrated. Well, gosh, he's broken another plate or he's broken another glass. And my husband's dyspraxic as well as my son's dyspraxic. So we got lots of plastic cups in our house because we go through a lot of cups if we got glass. But you know what? It's not done on purpose. It's not done maliciously. It just happens. So once you see that it's not somebody's fault, then it's a different conversation you're having, And we're all good at some things, and some things we find harder to do. So
absolutely.
It's finding your strength really important.
So Professor Amanda Kirby, it is genetic, isn't it? Dyspraxia.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. So neurodevelopmental conditions, dyspraxia, dyslexia, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, language difficulties, run in families. But actually, if you look back, my family, if I looked like my uncle was probably dyspraxic, but nobody knew when he was growing up, But if I look back now, and I'm sure he was, and if we look in our family, both sides, my husband and mine, we come from a really neurodivergent family, but 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, people said, oh, Uncle Joe was a bit clumsy, or Auntie Annie never read, right? Never learned to read. And so we just thought that's the way they were. But it's actually only now where we're understanding why it was really difficult for my auntie to be able to read, that she would found it really difficult. She went to school, it was fine, but she couldn't learn to spell, so now we understand what that is.
Absolutely.
So there's lots of people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s. And actually, I remember talking to lots of parents, and I'd go, who's he or she most like? And they go, oh, he's like me. I was just like that. But they didn't get a diagnosis. So that's sometimes a revelation for parents, because you just go, that's me, recognizing that themselves.
Absolutely. My son's got ADHD. My middle daughter has dyspraxia. The younger one, I don't know at the moment. No. She's 10. So I'm like, there are some telltale signs I can see. I'd rather go for help than leave it till it's too late. And I think I'm talking to our viewers and our listeners at the moment. If you can notice that things isn't what they used to be or how they should be, then please go and ask for help.
Absolutely.
The longer you leave it, the more becomes an impact, which leads me on to a question that someone's put up again. I imagine there is an association and depression. Is there any sign where one can distinguish between seeking help from a mental health professional or a kind of dyspraxia specialist?
Well, I think it depends. So anxiety and depression are a greater risk in people who are dyspraxic than in the general population. We see that about 60 to 70% of people with dyspraxia do become anxious at times, and there is a risk of depression. And I think that at any time, you have to say, what's the most important thing at the moment? So if somebody is feeling very anxious and very depressed, it's very difficult for them to think about anything else. If you're very anxious, you really can get brain fog, and you can't think and you can't focus, and it affects your sleep. That then affects your coordination because you're not able to focus. So if that's the dominant thing that's going on in your life at the moment, then that's the bit we have to focus on first, because if we can get you feeling better, then you can do the other things. Now, at the same time, physical fitness helps with depression. So that doing exercise, going out for a walk, every day, those things can really make a difference. Doing something like having a gratitude diary, writing 3 things every day that have been good for you. All of those things can lift your mood, but they can also help you to be organized and help you if you're dyspraxic as well. So combination of the two, but your mental well-being always needs to come first, of course.
Yeah, and I think for me, how I've kind of managed my dyspraxia is if it's too overwhelming, I have to stop, walk away, and come back to it. And I stop apologizing, and please, I'm so sorry I can't do this. I stop apologizing because it is what it is.
It is. And be kind to yourself. I think that's the other thing. Sometimes we ruminate, we think about these things and we go, why didn't I do it? And should I have done it? And what did I didn't do? And actually just be kind to yourself. That, the way that we do things, sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes you'll need to, have a bit more practice to learn something. And it's fine. It is the way you're wired, and that's it, And we all come with strengths and we come with challenges. And I think it's really important to value yourself.
Of course, yeah.
Really important.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor Amanda Kirby. Now, please share some of your written books with us, because I think many people want to perhaps maybe tap into it. And any of your books audible that maybe someone with dyslexia. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So this was one of the first books that I brought out, which has been reprinted, Dyspraxia and Developmental Coordination Disorder. And then this one's for schools. So if you've got a child who's in school, 100 Ideas. So that's got help in primary school and secondary school with a colleague, Lynn, who I worked with for a long time. This one is for parents, if you've got an adolescent with developmental coordination disorder. And these 2 are in audible format as well as in book format. And they include dyspraxia, but they also include all the other conditions which often go together. And they're all about helping you to succeed if you're in college, university, or then there's another one that when you're in employment. And I've got one coming out next year around neurodiversity in the workplace as well.
And I think another great book you wrote, Professor Amanda Kirby, is The Hidden Handicap?
But it's this one. So this was called the hidden handicap, but we renamed it just Dyspraxia and Developmental Coordination Disorder, because when I first wrote it, we used the term hidden handicap, and I actually felt then later on, you're not handicapped, because I felt dyspraxia is who you are, and it's about who you are. And so took that title and just left it as Dyspraxia and Developmental Coordination Disorder. So that's my original one, which was originally called, as you say, the hidden handicap.
That's the one that Toomey sings praises about. He said, look, I needed that book and I got it. And that's what saved his life, you know, when he came on a live show. He's always promoting it everywhere he goes.
Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. So they're all practical because they're written from a parent's soul and with lots of practical experience from children and adults that I work with, you know, the hundreds and thousands of families I've worked with. So they are very practical. So at the end of the day, I am still a parent and I'm a grandparent. And so helping children and parents and adults to be the best they can be is something that still I'm passionate about.
Wonderful. I've got a question here. Sorry for all the questions from Matt. Is there any reason why dyspraxics will struggle more with presentations or public speaking than others?
So I think we go back to my bucket analogy, which is if you're having to talk to others, multitasking is often the problem. So if you're having to think about, I'm going to be talking to you and I've got to think about what I'm going to say, and I've got my notes in front of me and I'm standing here and is my hair okay? If I've got multiple things that I've got to think about, then it's more of a cognitive load on you. So then it's, and if you're a bit distractible and there's some sounds or noise around you, then it's a bit harder. So that's why can be harder sometimes, depending on whether you're familiar with the room or familiar with the people. It's putting more load on you. So that's why sometimes that can be harder.
Right. And just to say, the person who dropped that message, you were not asking a lot of questions at all. These are some of the questions I probably would have asked. I'm glad that you have asked it as well. So you're more than welcome. Keep asking the question, keep bringing them, because that's the only way we learn, honestly. Absolutely. And who better to give us an understanding than Professor Amanda Kirby. My last question then, Professor Amanda Kirby, would be, what are some of the top tips? Let's say 3 top tips that you would give.
3.
One. Okay.
I'm going to do more than 3 because I'm
more than 3.
More than 3.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So one of the things is, if you're an adult, is learn to sell your strengths, because I think that's really important. Think about when you're going, if you're working in the workplace, is to really think about what you're good at, but ask for help. Don't put off asking for help. So go for access to work. If you're going for an interview, tell people also that you might need help and ask for those adjustments, because it makes a difference. So do ask for help. Number 2, really think about fatigue. A lot of adults and children talk about being very tired. So fitness is really important. So do find out a sport. It might be walking, it might be running, it could be swimming, it could be going to the gym, it could be it's harder at the moment, but even at home on a mat in 2 square feet, you could do quite a lot, okay? So get fit. It can really make a difference, and work at your core. The more that your core's fitter, then you've got this bit in the middle, then it means that it's less work for you to keep yourself upright. Persist and improve your skills. So keep going. Sometimes a lot of people give up too easily who are dyspraxic because it's hard. So practice. If it's something that interests you, keep going. Remember my son with his riding a bike. Organization. Really use frameworks to reduce the load. When I mean a framework, use a diary, use a shopping list. You don't have to rely on your memory all the time, because I think that's really important. Set yourself alarms. Give yourself, that takes away the cognitive load, can really make a difference. Think of yourself in 5 years' time and who you want to be. If I look back on my son, who's wonderful, 35-year-old now, I couldn't have imagined at 10 or 11 who he would be. He's married and he's a wonderful man and he's a caring man. And he was very different to the young boy who was very uncertain about himself. So imagine yourself to who you want to be and work towards that and ask for help. And last of all, be kind to yourself. You know, you are your own best friend or your own worst enemy. And I think that's really important. And there is help out there. There's some really great strategies in lots of sites. So we'll give you some links to resources afterwards as well.
Wonderful. Now, I think we've got a psychologist who always joins us every day. And I just have to say hello to her, Dr. Heather Ashley. And she's actually written all those points that you've said on actually the Facebook platform, and work towards who you want to be. She's written that for us, which is great. It's just so amazing, because as you were talking, I thought, oh, I remember all that. But Dr. Heather, Doctor, learn to sow your strengths is number one. She's put that up. Number two, she's put another one for number two, if Alex can share. Find a sport you like to overcome fatigue. Get fit. Point three, I think she's written it for persist and pursue your skills. Keep going. And point four, it's coming up in a minute. Use a diary, shopping list. Set yourself alarms. It helps with cognitive loads. Yes, I think I will agree. Work towards who you want to be. And I think it's fantastic. Now, I always say that it's not just, dyspraxia is an area that lots of people really want to understand. And I think this live show has given some insight into it. I would say to our viewers, look, purchase the book that Professor Amanda Kirby's written. There's Audible version, so you couldn't even say, look, I couldn't read it, because you can listen to it. Now, what I do with a lot of the Audible books when I'm going for my walks in the morning or last thing in the bed when I'm sleeping, I'll be listening to that. I think it's great to really tap into these kind of things. If anybody wants to get in contact with Professor Amanda Kirby, you can find her on LinkedIn. You can find her on the social media platforms, which I will let Professor Amanda Kirby tell you what they are. We'll also share them. So, Professor Amanda Kirby, how do we reach you? How do people contact you?
So doitprofiler.com, that's one of my websites. You can see me there. Prof. Amanda Kirby. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I post things regularly with lots of practical strategies. Boxofideas.org is a website that I put together a few years ago. It's got thousands of practical strategies, all free, open access. So go to boxofideas.org and you'll find lots of strategies for dyslexia and dyspraxia for all ages. And just keep in touch, and I'm happy to be here to help you.
Wonderful. Now, just to say to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. I wondered if there is any more questions. I'm all for questions. I love questions, because I'm the one who's always asking. In lectures, I'll be like putting my hand up 4 or 5 times throughout the lectures. And I'll always say, look, questions is the only way we learn. So if anybody's got any more questions, of course, fire them away. If not, we will be bringing the program to an end. There is a link that we will be sharing on all our social media platforms. And it's Professor Amanda Kirby's link. When I clicked on it and saw all the videos and all the webinars you've done, I was like, whoa, you can't put a price on this. Honestly. And during semi-lockdown, or whatever we are in at the moment, 6 people meeting, perhaps you might want to stay indoors and watch some of the webinars that Professor Kirby have put together. I want to say thank you to everybody who engaged with us this evening. I say this evening because we're in the UK, and it is, I think, I'm not even too sure what the time is now, 7:45. Yes. And of course, Professor Amanda Kirby's on the other side of where she lives, which I don't know where she lives at the moment. Somewhere very far, yes. And I think it's great that, we can engage and connect via, the platform that we're using. I always say to a lot of our clients, excuses or whatever you might have, I'm not saying people make excuses, but these days, everything is readily available. If you don't understand something, you can talk to your phone. You can ask Suri. You can Google it by asking. There's so many tools available. And that's our live shows are going on. We'll be having people coming to talk about neurodiversity in the workplace, what equipment you could get, how to find jobs as a dyslexic or dyspraxic person. So many things that we've got in the pipeline. And, it's great to really sort of go and look for it. Coral Brown says, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Coral, for joining us on A2I Dyslexia, all things dyslexia. Jill says, thank you so much. Very interesting, which is great. I mean, it's wonderful. Heather says, great platform. Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everybody. Leslie said, thank you. That was so inspiring. And I think understanding dyspraxia has become a bit easier for me now to manage my dyspraxia and so forth. And also just to say to people that are watching, make this be a conversation around the dining table. Let's not sort of hold back and not speak about things that we can get help for. because we see this every day. We get phone calls, emails, people saying, look, I need help, but I don't even know what condition I might have. And honestly, if you don't know it, you can Google it, you can find out, you can read about it. And also there are other platforms that talk about different conditions that may be out there. The buzzword at the moment, neurodiversity, it may sound new to some people, but Professor Amanda Kirby can probably give us a rundown what that is. So if we see the word neurodiversity, what is it, Professor Amanda?
So neurodiversity means everyone's brains, and it's about celebrating difference. And that actually when we can see, we've all got spiky profiles. Some of us are going to have strengths and we're going to have challenges. And it's that difference between the spikiness, so the strong bits and the weaker bits, and neurodiversity is everyone's brains. And underneath that, some people have neurodivergent traits and may have ADHD and ASD and dyslexia and dyspraxia, and they often overlap. And it's celebrating, what we need to do is celebrate that actually there wouldn't be neurodiversity if it wasn't good for the society. So our genes that we've got are there for a really good reason. So we need to highlight talent and minimize our challenges. It's only by having programs like this that really we can do that.
Thank you. One last question before we go, Professor Amanda Kirby. So Ini Kisu have come up with a question: can dyspraxia worsen with age or burnt out, etc.? Does it worsen with age?
Not necessarily, no, because the one thing you can do when you're not in school and when you're at home or in the workplace is you can avoid some things. So you don't need to do handwriting, you could use a computer. You don't need to play team games or ball games. You can go swimming or go for a walk. So some of the things that were challenging, but what is harder is that you've got to do more things without the support around you. So some people find they get more anxious when they're adults than when they're children, because you've got to multitask, you've got to manage home and you've got to manage work and your family. And it's that where you're trying to do all of that and manage your dyspraxia as well. So sometimes anxiety is worse in adulthood rather than the motor difficulties per se.
Absolutely, because every time my daughter's getting ready for school, we'll get halfway down the road. So, I haven't got my PE kit. I'm like, okay, yeah, because Mummy forgot it and you forgot it. So here we go. But I am planning, changing all that by having my sticky notes everywhere to keep reminding me. Yeah. Professor Amanda Kirby, thank you very much for coming on All Things Dyslexia Live Show. We want to thank you for your time. We want to thank you for the knowledge you share with us. And of course, we'll share all your links and your social media platform with many people that engage with us on the show. Thank you very much for coming on the show this evening. I don't know if you want to say anything to anyone. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me, Elizabeth. I've enjoyed it. And I hope I've helped a few people.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next week, we're back and we're speaking. Actually, I don't think we're here next week. We're not here on the 12th, or we may be. I'm not too sure. If we are, you'll find out on LinkedIn. This is probably my Dyspraxa coming in now, trying to organize everything. You will find out if we are, but if not, we will come up with something, because the person who's supposed to come on next week is not able to make it. So we will somehow let you know what's going to happen on the 12th. If not, we'll see you another time, on a Monday on All Things Dyslexia platform. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Take care. Goodbye for now.
Bye now.
Bye. Bye.